Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into what is arguably one of the most wild and fascinating business stories in human history. We're going to unpack exactly how one man, John D. Rockefeller, built an unimaginable $400 billion empire from scratch. But here's the real kicker. He pulled this off using a highly orchestrated, absolutely ruthless strategy that would be completely unequivocally illegal today. We're going to open up the hood, look right at the mechanics of his blueprint, see how he executed it, and figure out what modern business builders can actually learn from a strategy that literally forced the US government to rewrite the rules of commerce.
Okay, to start, we really need to wrap our heads around this unimaginable scale. 90%. When we talk about a monopoly, we aren't just talking about being the biggest, most successful player in the room. Rockefeller didn't just lead the market. Actually, scratch that. He didn't lead it, he completely swallowed it whole. At his peak, he controlled roughly 90% of America's oil refining. I mean, just imagine one person today controlling 90% of the entire global tech industry, or 90% of world shipping. It's a level of dominance so absolute, so suffocating to any competition, that governments basically had no choice but to change the law just to deal with him. And seeing a number like that naturally begs a massive question for us: exactly how did he pull off this absolute overwhelming domination? And maybe more importantly, why can't modern billionaires, with all their massive capital and advanced technology, just copy his exact playbook to achieve the same thing? To understand why this blueprint is strictly forbidden today, we really have to look at how it was constructed in the first place. Section 1. Rise of the Oil King. Before we get into those ruthless tactics and break down the actual machinery of his monopoly, we have to look at where this legendary accumulation of wealth actually started. Because, trust me, he certainly didn't begin at the top. Rockefeller's story starts in 1839, born into relative poverty. No inherited wealth, no vast, powerful networks. By the 1850s, he was working as a humble accountant. And that's a crucial detail, because that's where he learned to view the entire world through the lens of extreme efficiency, tight margins, and relentless cost-cutting. In the 1860s, he recognized the sheer chaotic potential of the American oil boom. It was basically a wild west of fragmented, disorganized wildcatters. Recognizing that chaos is really just poorly managed opportunity, he stepped right in. And by 1870, he founded Standard Oil. Section 2. The Four-Step Blueprint. So what happened after 1870? Well, it definitely wasn't a series of lucky breaks. He deployed a highly calculated, absolutely ruthless, four-step strategy to dominate the industry from the ground up. Here is the exact playbook. Step 1. Aggressively undercut prices. He would literally sell oil at a loss in specific regions just to starve out the local competition. He was so intense about this that he would sometimes secretly buy up all the oak barrels in a region, meaning his competitors physically had nothing to put their oil in. Crazy, right? Step 2 was the ultimatum, the infamous buy or bankrupt phase. Once a competitor was bleeding cash, he offered to buy them for pennies on the dollar. If they refused, he just kept prices low until they went bankrupt anyway. Step 3 was pure logistical genius. He secured exclusive, totally secret deals with railroads for cheaper shipping rates, meaning his competitors had to pay more just to move their own product. And finally, Step 4. He took all the battered, defeated remnants of his rivals and merged them into one giant, unified entity, Standard Oil. The staggering result of all those aggressive tactics was absolute, unquestioned control. Standard Oil essentially became the entire market. That tiny 10% sliver you see left over, that represents literally everyone else in the entire country just scrambling to survive against his machine. By controlling both the refining process and the transportation lines, he created an inescapable bottleneck. He didn't just beat the competition, he absorbed them. The real-world impact of this dominance is just staggering. He wasn't just wealthy, he peaked as the richest man in modern history. Adjusted for today's inflation, we are talking about a mind-bending estimated net worth of $400 billion. But listen, it wasn't just about the money sitting in the bank. His power touched literally everything. Because oil was the lifeblood of the new industrial era, Rockefeller indirectly controlled transportation networks, he powered global factories, and he even supplied the rapidly expanding war industries. He effectively held the keys to the modern world's engine. Section 3. The Empire Falls. But peak power of that magnitude inevitably attracts attention. You simply cannot hold an entire economy hostage without facing some kind of consequence. When Rockefeller's extreme monopoly finally collided head-on with government regulation, it was because the United States realized their so-called free market wasn't actually free anymore. In direct response to Rockefeller and a few other titans, they passed the Sherman Antitrust laws.
This was entirely new, unprecedented legislation, specifically designed to break up monopolies and prevent the illegal domination of markets. For the very first time, the government actually had the legal teeth to formally target his chokehold on the American economy. The whole showdown culminated in a landmark 1911 U.S. Supreme Court case. The court took a hard look at Standard Oil's practices and completely brought down the hammer. His giant, unified black oil empire was legally shattered. It was broken up into 34 separate, smaller companies. Interestingly enough, many of these fragmented pieces actually grew into the massive oil companies we all know today, like Exxon and Chevron. But the age of the singular, all-controlling oil empire, that was officially over.
Section 4. The Modern Monopoly Lesson.
Now, looking back at all this history, you might be sitting there wondering about today's landscape. Why don't modern tech giants or today's billionaires just repeat this exact playbook to achieve that level of extreme control? I mean, why isn't someone doing this right now? Well, because the rules of the game have fundamentally changed. Rockefeller operated in an old, closed market. There were literally zero monopoly laws when he started out, and his secret backroom deals with railroads, they were completely hidden from the public. Today, we're in a modern, open market. We have strict, aggressively enforced antitrust laws. We face global, worldwide competition rather than just local skirmishes. And crucially, we have information-age transparency. If a modern CEO tried to artificially starve competitors while making secret kickback deals, it would be exposed on the internet and shut down by regulators almost immediately. So, if the actual monopoly tactics, the undercutting, the secret shipping deals, the forced buyouts, if all of that is highly illegal now, what is the legal actionable takeaway we can actually learn from his success today? What was the underlying engine of his empire that didn't rely on just breaking the rules? The real secret here, the true, lasting genius of John D. Rockefeller, wasn't the monopoly itself. It was the incredibly efficient, highly optimized systems he built to sustain it. Going all the way back to his days as an accountant, he was totally obsessed with eliminating waste. While his competitors were sloppy and disorganized, Rockefeller built absolutely airtight logistical pipelines. He found profitable uses for oil byproducts that everyone else was literally just throwing away. So the modern takeaway is this: build systems, not shortcuts. You don't need to control markets illegally if you can control efficiency better than anyone else. He scaled his business through relentless, sometimes boring, but brilliant innovation in his supply chain. When we look back at his legacy, we really have to remember this profound quote. He didn't break laws, he operated before they existed. He was basically playing a game with no referee. That Wild West environment of the late 19th century is gone completely, which means his specific unregulated version of brute force wealth accumulation can never, ever return. That exact blueprint belongs firmly in the history books. But as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a pretty provocative thought to chew on. While the old playbook of railroad kickbacks and price gouging is dead and buried, take a look around at the digital platforms we use every single day. Our modern companies, through massive data collection, algorithmic control, and incredibly optimized tech systems, just finding new, perfectly legal ways to build systems of ultimate control? It's definitely something to think about the next time you casually tap an app or order a package to your door. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the Rockefeller blueprint. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.